gave birth alone, while my husband ignored my calls to hang out with his sister. When I found out she wasn't his sister and confronted him, he smirked and said, "The sister thing was just easier." I stayed silent. That was 9 months ago. Now his mom sends me flowers and he doesn't even know where we live. My husband Theodore was always freakishly close with his sister, Olivia. In our 3-year relationship, he has canceled dates to hang out with her, sleeps over at her house and share a bed together, and even calls her romantic pet names. But the thing is, it never drove me away, because the rest of his family died in a tragic car accident when he was in his 20s. Plus, he was Italian, and in their culture, everything goes. The part that upset me the most is that she always seemed to hate me. Like, one time when they came back from dinner, I saw she was wearing my diamond necklace, and when I subtly mentioned it, she just said, "Well, I thought you wouldn't mind since it obviously looks better on me anyway." Or another time, she started a fight between us by telling him that she saw me flirting with another guy. The flirting in question? I told a guy on the street his shoelaces were untied. I honestly felt like a third wheel when we all hung out together, but I still never minded, because I just figured, it's his sister, family comes first, and I wanted our daughter to be close with her aunt too, until one day, when my water broke. I was alone in the house, and when I called Theodore, he texted saying, "With Olivia, can't talk RN, just text." And when I told him I was about to go into labor, he didn't reply. So, I called the ambulance, but they put me on hold. So there I was, about to give birth, driving to the hospital all by myself. The only person who was there to hold my hand and comfort me was my mom. There were complications during the birth, so I had to spend the night in hospital. Theodore didn't even show up until the next morning. "Good morning, my love. I'm so sorry I never saw your text," was all he said, before picking our baby girl and twirling her around the room. Well, I was still extremely vulnerable and sensitive from the pregnancy, so I figured it was easier to just let it slide than to bring it up. And I guess he knew he messed up, because for the next few days, he was the most attentive, kindest father and husband any woman could ever dream of. Every time I winced, he was already standing with the heating pad before I could ask. And even when I insisted I was fine, he sang lullabies to the baby at night while rubbing my swollen feet. But I guess old habits really do die hard, because it wasn't long until Theodore was barely home again, hanging out with Olivia. So one day, when I was feeling particularly miserable and lonely, I left the house with my baby girl to visit the old neighbor lady. Mind you, this lady has lived in this town since she was born. She knows everybody. So as I'm ranting, Olivia comes up, and I started telling her how I didn't mind him prioritizing his family, but I thought after I gave birth things would change. Suddenly, her face drained of color. She gripped the table to steady herself. "That's not his sister," she said, voice shaking. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Olivia is my coworker's daughter and has no siblings. And in the worst way possible, everything had finally clicked. The loving glances, the playful touching, the constant tickling. I called my mom crying, and she didn't say anything, just told me she was on the way over. My chest was burning up so much I thought I was having a heart attack. Luckily, she packed up all his things without question. So that night, Theodore came home to all of his stuff in bin bags at the door. I told him what I knew, and he didn't even seem ashamed, just sad that he'd been caught. "Babe, she's just a friend." I slapped him. "You will never be allowed near me or our baby again. Get the F out of my face." A smirk was instantly plastered on his face. "You say that like it's a bad thing," he remarked. During all this, my baby girl was sleeping upstairs in her cot, so my mom had no issue with shoving him away from me and telling him to F off. He left, and even though I felt like a total badass, it was hard. And somehow, things were about to get even harder, because when I went back to the neighbor lady, she told me his family had never died. His mom is alive, but he has no contact with her. However, he still talks to 3 of his aunts, 2 uncles, and has several cousins. Suddenly, all my heartbreak was replaced with a deep, unearthing rage, and I was going to make him and Olivia suffer hard. I spent the next few days in a daze, alternating between crying uncontrollably and feeling this burning rage that made my hands shake. My mom stayed with me, taking care of the baby when I couldn't pull myself together enough to do it. I'd just stare at my daughter's tiny face and wonder how someone could lie about literally everything in their life. Like, who does that? Who pretends their family is dead? Who pretends their girlfriend is their sister? It was seriously messed up. I needed answers, and I knew I wouldn't get them from Theodore. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started digging. First, I checked our wedding photos. There were these cousins who came to the wedding that Theodore had introduced as distant relatives from his mom's side who survived the accident. I found one guy on Facebook and sent him a message asking how he knew Theodore. Turns out he was Theodore's actual brother. Not cousin, brother. The one who supposedly died in the car crash. He seemed confused by my questions but told me Theodore had 5 siblings total, all very much alive. I felt sick to my stomach. Who lies about their siblings being dead? What kind of psychopath does that? I called my best friend Reese and told her everything. She came over immediately with a bottle of wine and her laptop. "We're going full detective mode," she announced. While my mom watched the baby, Reese and I started searching for everything we could find about Theodore's real life. We found his mom's Facebook page pretty quickly. She posted regularly about her garden and her book club. No mention of Theodore anywhere, which was weird. But there were plenty of photos of her with her other children at family gatherings. Theodore wasn't in any of them. "This is some seriously twisted stuff," Reese said, scrolling through years of family photos with no Theodore in sight. "It's like he erased himself from his actual family and created this fake tragic backstory." I nodded, feeling numb. But why? Why would anyone do that? We kept digging and found Theodore's elevated school yearbook photos online. There he was, looking younger, but with that same charming smile that had fooled me so completely. And right next to him in the cheerleading squad photo was Olivia. They weren't in the same grade. She was a year older, but they definitely knew each other in elevated school. So they've known each other since they were teenagers, I said, feeling another wave of betrayal wash over me. He told me they met in college. Reese squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, girl. This is beyond messed up. The next day, I created a fake Instagram account and followed Olivia. Her profile was public, and I scrolled back years through her posts. There were dozens of photos of her and Theodore together, going back at least 5 years. In some of the older ones before I met him, the captions were things like date night with my love and 3 years with this handsome man. Then suddenly, around the time Theodore and I started dating, the captions changed to things like sibling time and brother-sister day out. They had literally rewritten their relationship history when he met me. They'd been dating for years before I came along, and instead of breaking up, they created this elaborate lie about being siblings. I felt physically ill. I showed my mom, who had been quietly supportive through all of this. She looked at the photos and shook her head. You need to talk to a lawyer, she said firmly. This isn't just about separation. This is about protecting you and the baby. She was right. I called a lawyer named Linda the next day. She specialized in family law and had this no-nonsense attitude I immediately appreciated. I told her everything, showing her the evidence we'd gathered. She listened carefully, taking notes. This is certainly unusual, she said when I finished. But unfortunately, lying to your spouse isn't illicit. Being a terrible person isn't grounds for anything special in separation proceedings. I felt deflated. So he just gets away with it? Not necessarily, Linda said, leaning forward. We need to focus on what matters legally. Custody of your daughter and division of assets. Has he tried to contact you about seeing the baby? Surprisingly, he hadn't. It had been almost a week, and Theodore hadn't called or texted once about our daughter. It was like he'd completely disappeared from our lives. That's actually good for us, Linda explained. It shows a lack of interest in parenting. Document everything. Every missed call, every day he doesn't ask about his child. It'll help us build a case for primary custody. I left Linda's office feeling slightly more in control. I had a plan now at least. But that control didn't last long. When I got home, there was a huge bouquet of flowers on my doorstep with a card from Theodore. I miss my girls. Let's talk. No apology. No acknowledgement of his massive deception. Just, let's talk, like we'd had some minor disagreement. I threw the flowers in the trash and took a picture of them there, sending it to him with no caption. He called immediately, but I didn't answer. Instead, I texted, all communication through my lawyer from now on. Then I blocked his number. That night, Olivia showed up at my door. I was feeding the baby when I heard the knock. Through the peephole, I saw her standing there, looking nervous. I didn't open the door. I know you're in there, she called out. We need to talk about this. It's not what you think. I laughed bitterly to myself. Not what I think? What else could it possibly be? Go away or I'm calling the police, I shouted through the door. You're overreacting, she said, her voice taking on that condescending tone I'd heard so many times before. Theodore and I have a complicated history, but we're not together anymore. We haven't been since he met you. I didn't respond. I just took out my phone and started recording, in case she said anything I could use later. The sister thing was just easier to explain, she continued when I didn't answer. His family is really messed up. They did basically disown him. The car accident thing was just, I don't know. It was easier than explaining the real situation. I still said nothing. Fine, she finally said. Be that way. But you should know Theodore is devastated. He loves that baby, and he's not going to just walk away. After she left, I called my lawyer and told her about the visit. She advised me to file for a temporary restraining order just to be safe. If they're willing to maintain a lie this elaborate for years, who knows what else they might do, she pointed out. The next day, I went to the courthouse and filed the paperwork. I felt a little silly doing it. Theodore had never been physically violent with me, but the psychological manipulation was real, and I was genuinely afraid of what he might do next. I was right to be worried. That weekend, I woke up to find my car tires slashed. All 4 of them. There was no note, no evidence of who did it, but I knew. I called the police, who came and took a report but didn't seem particularly interested. Probably just random vandalism, the officer said with a shrug. I knew better. I installed security cameras that day. The cameras paid off sooner than I expected. 2 nights later, they caught Theodore trying to use his key to get into the house at 2 a.m. The restraining order had been granted by then, so I called the police immediately. They came and apprehended him for violating the order. He spent the night in prison before being released on bail the next morning. His apprehension seemed to escalate things. The next day, I started getting calls from unknown numbers. When I answered, no one would speak. Just silence, then a hang-up. This happened at least 10 times. I changed my number that afternoon. Then the social media harassment started. Someone, I assumed Olivia, created fake accounts and started posting horrible things about me. They claimed I was mentally unstable, that I had cheated on Theodore, that I was an unfit mother. They tagged my workplace, my friends, even my extended family members. I printed everything out for my growing file of evidence and reported the accounts, but new ones kept popping up. It was exhausting and terrifying. I felt like I was being stalked by people who knew everything about me, while I was still discovering new lies about them. Through all this, I was trying to take care of a newborn. My maternity leave was running out, and I needed to figure out childcare. My mom had already stayed much longer than she planned, but she could see I was struggling. I'll stay as long as you need, she assured me. We'll get through this together. I broke down crying, overwhelmed by gratitude. I don't know what I'd do without you, I told her. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Against my better judgment, I did. There was a message from Theodore with the subject line, the truth. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. The email was long and rambling. Theodore claimed he and Olivia had dated in elevated school, but broke up when they went to different colleges. They reconnected years later and dated again briefly before he met me. According to him, they decided to pretend to be siblings because his family had disowned him for dating Olivia. Apparently, her father had some long-standing feud with Theodore's family, and he didn't want to explain the complicated situation to me when we first started dating. The lie just got bigger and bigger, he wrote. I never meant for it to go this far. I really do love you and our daughter. Please give me another chance. I forwarded the email to my lawyer without responding to him. She called me right away. This is actually helpful for us, she said. He's admitting to the deception in writing, but more importantly, it shows he's still trying to contact you despite the restraining order. We can use this. The next week was quieter. No slash tires, no unexpected visits. I started to think maybe they had given up. I was wrong. I was at the grocery store with the baby when I ran into Mrs. Rossi. She looked worried when she saw me. I've been meaning to call you, she said, glancing around nervously. Olivia came to see me. She was asking all sorts of questions about what exactly I told you. She seemed not right, very angry. I think you should be careful. I thanked her for the warning and hurried home, feeling paranoid about every car that seemed to be going in the same direction as me. When I got home, I checked the security camera footage. Nothing unusual, but I still felt uneasy. That night, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a rock through my living room window. I grabbed the baby from her crib and locked us both in the bathroom, calling 911 with shaking hands. The police came quickly this time, but whoever had broken the window was long gone. The officer took my statement and looked at the security footage, but the person had stayed out of the camera's view. All you could see was a gloved hand throwing the rock. Could be anyone, the officer said unhelpfully. I couldn't stay in the house after that. I packed some essentials and went to a hotel for the night. The next day, I called my boss and explained the situation. She was surprisingly understanding and agreed to let me work remotely for a while. I found an Airbnb in a nearby town and booked it for 2 weeks. My mom came with me, of course. The Airbnb was a small cottage on the outskirts of town. It felt safer being somewhere Theodore wouldn't think to look for me. I spent my days working, taking care of the baby, and building my case with Linda. We had a court date set for the custody hearing, and I was determined to be prepared. About a week into our stay at the Airbnb, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hello? I said cautiously. Is this Theodore's wife? A woman's voice asked. Who is this? I replied, not wanting to give away any information. My name is Susan. I'm Theodore's mother. I nearly dropped the phone. His mother. The one who was supposedly dead. The one he claimed had disowned him. She was calling me. Yes, I'm his wife. I finally managed to say. Though we're separated now. I know, she said. That's why I'm calling. I think we should meet. There are things you should know about my son. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop the next day. I was nervous about it being a trap, so I asked Reese to come with me. My mom stayed with the baby at the Airbnb. Susan turned out to be a petite woman in her 60s with Theodore's same dark eyes. She looked tired and sad as she sat across from me, stirring her coffee absently. I haven't spoken to my son in almost 3 years, she began. Not because I disowned him, as I'm sure he told you, but because he cut us all off when we expressed concern about his relationship with Olivia. What kind of concern? I asked. Susan sighed. Olivia has always had an unhealthy attachment to Theodore. They dated in elevated school, and it was intense but seemed normal enough. Then they broke up when they went to different colleges. Theodore met a nice girl named Casey at university, and they were together for almost 2 years. I felt a jolt. Another girlfriend I'd never heard about. Then Olivia transferred to Theodore's college, Susan continued. Within a month, he and Casey had broken up, and he was back with Olivia. That's when things started getting strange. Olivia didn't want him spending time with his family. She would call constantly when he was visiting us. If he didn't answer right away, she would show up at our house. Susan took a sip of her coffee. We tried to talk to him about it. We were worried it was becoming controlling, maybe even abusive. That's when he exploded at us, saying we were trying to ruin his life and that we'd never accepted Olivia. He stopped coming to family events. Then he stopped taking our calls. Eventually, he blocked all our numbers. I sat there stunned. This was yet another version of Theodore I hadn't known existed. The last I heard from him was a text saying he was getting married, Susan said, her voice breaking slightly. He didn't invite any of us to the wedding. I found out I had a granddaughter through Facebook. One of Theodore's cousins saw a post from one of your friends. I felt a rush of sympathy for this woman who had been cut out of her son's life and had missed the birth of her grandchild. But I was also wary. This could be another manipulation. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I'm worried about you and the baby, she said simply. Olivia is not stable, and Theodore, he enables her. They bring out the worst in each other. When I heard you had separated, I was concerned about what they might do. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. These are copies of police reports and restraining orders from when Theodore and Olivia were together before. His ex-girlfriend Casey filed harassment complaints against them. They would show up at her workplace, call her at all hours, spread rumors about her. It got so bad she had to move to another state. I took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were copies of police reports, restraining orders, and even some disturbing emails from both Theodore and Olivia to this Casey person. Susan had obtained these through her attorney, who had helped Casey file the original complaints. The attorney had kept copies of everything and shared them with Susan when she explained the situation with me. It was like looking at a blueprint for what they were now doing to me. Thank you for this, I said, feeling both validated and terrified. This will help with my case. Susan nodded. I want to help, and I'd like to meet my granddaughter someday, if you're comfortable with that. I promised to think about it. As we were leaving the coffee shop, Susan grabbed my arm. Be careful, she warned. They won't give up easily. She was right. When I got back to the Airbnb, my mom was in a panic. Someone had called the owner of the property claiming to be me, saying we needed to check out early due to a family emergency. The owner had come by to check, and my mom had to convince him it wasn't true. They had found us. I didn't know how, but they had. We packed up immediately and checked into a hotel under my mom's name. I called Linda and updated her on everything, including the meeting with Susan and the new evidence. This is exactly what we need, Linda said. With these previous police reports, we can make a strong case that Theodore is a danger to you and the baby. I'm going to file for an emergency custody hearing. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I was jumping at shadows, constantly looking over my shoulder. I was afraid to go anywhere alone. My mom and Reese took turns staying with me, making sure I was never by myself. The night before the hearing, I got an email from Theodore. I know where you are, it said. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret. Meet me at the park near your hotel tomorrow at 9 a.m. I forwarded it to Linda immediately. She called the police, who agreed to increase patrols around my hotel, but said there wasn't much else they could do since the email wasn't explicitly threatening. I barely slept that night, holding my baby close and listening for any unusual sounds. When morning came, I was exhausted, but determined. I wasn't going to meet Theodore, of course. I was going to court to make sure he could never threaten me or my daughter again. Linda met us at the courthouse early. She had prepared a mountain of evidence: the social media harassment, the slashed tires, the broken window, the police reports from Theodore's ex, and statements from both Mrs. Rossi and Susan about Theodore and Olivia's concerning behavior. As we waited for the hearing to start, I saw Theodore and Olivia walk in together. They weren't even trying to hide their relationship anymore. Theodore looked right at me and had the audacity to smile and wave, like we were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. Olivia just glared, her arm possessively linked through his. The judge called our case and I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. I clutched my evidence folder tightly and walked into the courtroom, ready to fight for my daughter's safety and my own peace of mind. Whatever happened today would determine our future, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to protect my little girl from the web of lies that had entangled us all. The judge was this older guy named Judge Williams, who looked like he'd seen it all. He had these reading glasses perched on the end of his nose and kept glancing between Theodore and me like he was trying to figure out who was telling the truth. Linda had prepped me well, telling me to stay calm and stick to the facts, which was harder than it sounds when your ex is sitting there smirking at you like he's already won. When it was my turn to speak, I laid it all out. The fake sister story, the lies about his dead family, the harassment after I found out. I showed the judge the security footage, the police reports, everything. My voice only cracked once, when I talked about driving myself to the hospital while in labor. Judge Williams actually looked up from his notes at that part. Theodore's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable and paranoid. He claimed Theodore and Olivia were just very close friends, who had a brief romantic history years ago. According to him, they pretended to be siblings because Theodore's family was complicated, and he wanted to simplify things for me. Like that makes any sense. The worst part was when Theodore took the stand. He put on this whole sad act, talking about how much he missed our daughter, and how I was keeping him from her. He even managed to squeeze out a few tears when he talked about wanting to be in her life. I had to dig my nails into my palms to keep from screaming. But then Linda got to cross-examine him, and that's when things got interesting. She started by asking simple questions about his family, his mother's name, his siblings' birthdays, basic stuff. He answered confidently, probably thinking this was easy. Then she pulled out the folder Susan had given me. Mr. Theodore, you testified that your mother disowned you 3 years ago, correct? Linda asked. Yes, that's right, he said. Then how do you explain this birthday card she sent you last year? Linda held up a card with Theodore's name on it. The one you responded to with this text message thanking her? Theodore's face went pale. Linda had gotten copies of text messages between him and his mom from Susan, messages that proved they were in contact much more recently than he claimed. He stammered. Linda didn't let up. And you testified that you and Olivia were just friends when you met your wife, correct? Yes, we had dated years before, but then how do you explain these social media posts from just 1 week before you met your wife? Linda pulled up the screenshots I'd found, showing Theodore and Olivia clearly in a romantic relationship right before he met me. It went on like that for almost an hour. Linda methodically dismantled every lie Theodore had told. By the end, he was sweating and contradicting himself left and right. The judge kept making these little notes, his expression getting sterner by the minute. When Olivia took the stand, things got even weirder. She couldn't keep her story straight at all. First, she said they were just friends when Theodore met me. Then she admitted they had been dating but broke up when he met me. Then she said they had never really broken up, but had an understanding. It was a mess. The real bombshell came when Linda called Susan as a surprise witness. Theodore's face when his very much alive mother walked into the courtroom was priceless. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, which I guess in a way he had, since he'd told me she was dead. Susan testified about Theodore and Olivia's pattern of behavior, how they had harassed his ex-girlfriend Casey to the point she had to move away. She brought letters, emails, more police reports. It was overwhelming evidence that this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern. After a short recess, Judge Williams came back looking grim. He granted me full custody of our daughter, with Theodore only getting supervised visitation once a month. He also extended the restraining order against both Theodore and Olivia for a full year, with the option to renew. The court finds the respondent's behavior concerning and potentially dangerous, Judge Williams said. The pattern of deception and harassment indicates an unstable situation that is not in the best interest of the child. I nearly collapsed with relief. Linda squeezed my hand under the table, and my mom, who who had been sitting behind us the whole time, let out a little sob. As we were leaving the courthouse, Theodore tried to approach me, but a bailiff stepped between us. "Don't think this is over," he hissed before his lawyer pulled him away. Those words haunted me for days afterward. I kept checking the locks on my doors and jumping at every noise. Linda assured me the restraining order had teeth. If Theodore or Olivia came anywhere near me or contacted me, they'd be apprehended immediately. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't done with me yet. I was right. About a week after the hearing, I started getting calls from Child Protective Services. Someone had reported me for neglect and unsafe living conditions. The CPS worker who came to inspect my apartment seemed embarrassed to even be there. It was obvious the place was clean and my daughter was well cared for. She told me they get false reports sometimes during custody disputes and apologized for the inconvenience. Then my boss called me into his office one day. Someone had emailed the company claiming I was stealing from clients. It was completely false, and thankfully my boss knew me well enough not to believe it, but it was still humiliating to have to defend myself. The final straw came when my neighbor knocked on my door one evening to tell me someone had been asking questions about me around the building. They had claimed to be an old friend trying to reconnect, but the description matched Olivia perfectly. I called Linda in a panic. "They're not stopping," I told her. "The restraining order isn't working. Document everything," she advised. "Every call, every report, every sighting. We'll go back to court if we need to." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Theodore had said. Don't think this is over. Maybe it never would be over. Maybe I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for them to pop up again. The thought was exhausting. The next morning, I made a decision. I called my mom and asked if her offer to let me stay with her for a while was still open. It was. Then I called my boss and asked about working remotely permanently. He was surprisingly supportive, especially after I explained the situation. Within a week, I had packed up our essential belongings and moved in with my mom in her small town 3 hours away. It wasn't running away, I told myself. It was a strategic retreat. A fresh start somewhere Theodore and Olivia wouldn't think to look for us. The first few months were hard. I jumped at shadows and panicked whenever an unknown number called. But slowly, life settled into a new normal. My daughter started crawling, then walking. I found a little house to rent not far from my mom's place. I made new friends who knew nothing about my past drama. I kept in touch with Linda, who updated me on the legal situation. Theodore had tried to contest the custody arrangement, claiming he'd changed and deserved more time with his daughter. The judge denied his request, pointing to the continued harassment as evidence that nothing had changed. About 6 months after we moved, I got a surprising call from Susan. She asked if she could visit to meet her granddaughter. I was hesitant at first, but she had helped me so much with the case that I agreed. She came for a weekend, and it was actually really nice. She brought photo albums of Theodore as a kid and told stories about his childhood that made him seem almost human. It was strange to reconcile the sweet little boy in those photos with the manipulative man I had married. He wasn't always like this, Susan said sadly as we watched my daughter play. Olivia brought out something dark in him, or maybe it was always there, and she just gave him permission to embrace it. Susan started visiting regularly after that. She was careful never to tell Theodore where we were, and I grew to trust her. My daughter loved her Grammy and would get excited whenever she visited. Life went on. I dated a bit, though I was super cautious about introducing anyone to my daughter. I made sure to do background checks and take things extremely slowly. Trust didn't come easily anymore. Then, about 1.5 years after we moved, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I know where you are." My fluids ran cold. I called Linda immediately, then the local police. They took a report but said there wasn't much they could do about a text message. I installed new security cameras and changed all my locks just in case. A week went by with no further contact. I started to think maybe it was just a random creepy text, not actually from Theodore or Olivia. Then I got an email from Susan asking if she could come visit that weekend. She mentioned she had some important news to share. When Susan arrived, she looked tired and stressed. We waited until my daughter was napping before she told me what was going on. "Theodore and Olivia broke up," she said. "It was messy. She's been telling people he mistreated her. He's been saying she's crazy. They're both dragging each other's names through the mud." I felt a weird mix of emotions. Vindication that their relationship had imploded, but also fear about what this might mean for me. Angry, unstable people can be unpredictable. "There's more," Susan continued. "Theodore got apprehended last week. He showed up at Olivia's place inebriated and caused a scene. She had a new boyfriend there, and Theodore went ballistic, broke some windows, threatened the guy. He's facing charges for lawbreaker damage and threatening behavior." I sat back, stunned. "So that text I got, probably from Olivia," Susan nodded. "She's been telling anyone who'll listen that Theodore ruined her life, and now she's out for revenge against anyone connected to him, including you." Great. Just great. I'd escaped one stalker only to potentially gain another, but at least with Theodore facing charges, he was less of an immediate threat. I reported the text to Linda, who added it to our growing file. She suggested we might be able to get a restraining order against Olivia as well, given the circumstances. The next few weeks were tense. I kept expecting Olivia to show up or for something bad to happen, but nothing did. Susan kept me updated on the situation. Theodore had pled guilty to lesser charges and gotten probation, plus mandatory anger management classes. Olivia had apparently moved on to harassing Theodore's new girlfriend, leaving me blessedly out of her crosshairs. Slowly, I started to relax again. My daughter turned 2, then 3. She was talking in full sentences now, a bright, happy kid with no memory of the drama surrounding her early life. I had been promoted at work and was doing well financially. I'd even started seeing someone, a kind, straightforward guy named William, who worked as an elementary school teacher and made amazing pancakes on Sunday mornings. Susan still visited regularly, and we developed a genuine friendship. She was the one who told me when Theodore finally moved out of state for a new job. I think it's it's good for him, she said. A fresh start, away from Olivia and all the bad memories. I agreed, though I made sure Linda filed the necessary paperwork to maintain the custody arrangement across state lines. I wasn't taking any chances. It's been 5 years now since that crazy court hearing. My daughter is starting kindergarten next month. William and I got married last year in a small ceremony. Nothing fancy, just close friends and family. Susan was there, beaming proudly as she watched her granddaughter throw flower petals down the aisle. Theodore still has his monthly supervised visits, though he only shows up for about half of them. He's remarried too, to someone he met at his new job. From what Susan tells me, he seems more stable now. The distance from Olivia has been good for him. We're never going to be friends, but we can be civil for our daughter's sake. As for Olivia, I haven't heard anything about her in years. She apparently moved to California to pursue acting or modeling or something. Good riddance. Sometimes I still can't believe how much my life changed because of one conversation with my neighbor. If Mrs. Rossi hadn't told me the truth that day, who knows how long I would have lived in that web of lies. I might still be there, feeling like a third wheel in my own marriage, wondering why I was never good enough. Instead, I'm here, in this peaceful little town, with my daughter and my husband, and a life that feels real and honest. It wasn't an easy road, and there were plenty of times I wanted to give up, but I didn't. I fought for myself and my daughter, and we made it through. That's the thing about lies. They eventually fall apart. The truth always finds its way out, one way or another. And when it does, you have a choice. You can either crumble with the lies, or you can build something new and better on the foundation of truth. I'm glad I chose the latter.